Be strong and courageous.
Anywhere you see a gap between what you think might be possible and what is, that's an opportunity for an entrepreneur to dive in.
There are ways to succeed. There are models in entrepreneurship, investing. There are people who have found a path before.
To dream about like what are the talents that you have and what are the things that make you come alive.
That there's actually a generation of warrior entrepreneurs, people that are willing to stand up, to do the hard work, to start a thing, to see a thing through.
Here's our mission, and we're going to take a step forward, just one foot in front of the other, and we're going to build something great.
We can make a difference. Let's do this in our lifetime. Let's see how much positive change we can drive. Well, welcome to another episode of Take Your Mountain podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of having with me actually our founding investor and original partner in Gratūs Capital, my dad, Jack Weimer. Welcome.
Hi.
So today we thought, in past episodes, interviewing with our other partners, kind of going through their background, what brought them to be partners. We thought it'd be kind of fun to rehash our investing kind of history together. Maybe just start off though with a little bit of history on yourself, kind of what brought you into your professional realm. When I got starting of age, where we started to do some things together.
Yeah. Well, I was always quite interested in electronics, and my dad was a mechanic, and I learned a lot about mechanics from my dad, but electronics always fascinated me, and I wanted to get involved in that. And I was very fortunate to have a series of different jobs, but I really spent like 36 years at one company, and I got to go from 5 employees to, I think we had about 400 employees by the time we were done. And I got to follow through that whole process. And along the way, I did get some equity in the company. And so as the company grew and we ultimately went public on the New York Stock Exchange. And so I got some liquidity then. And then we were purchased by one of our competitors later on the stock market. And then I had another liquidity event related to that. And so that's what created my problem, which is when you have some money all of a sudden and you haven't had much money up until that point. Now what do I do?
That's great. We'll come back to that. But I want to go back to your childhood and middle school, as you've shared with me, obviously, when it comes to this idea of purpose or passion or like what it is I'm going to do with my life. A lot of people either, don't give it much thought, or if they do give thought, they almost like have so much thought that they're not sure what to do. They lack conviction. Maybe share a little bit how you came to decide what you wanted to do with your life professionally.
Yeah.
And how, at what ages, like how that process worked for you.
Yeah. From my earliest days, like when I was in, I think it was 6th grade, I was so interested in electronics and electricity, that my English teacher knew that I wanted to do this. He was, we had to write some kind of a paper in class, and he, at the end of the year, he made up a story about all the different students and tied it all together. And he made some comment about me shocking people, electrically shocking people, because I actually built something like that and had it there, as a 6th grader. So that was.
Do you remember like the first time, like electronics? You probably introduced me to even this subject, but do you remember? And for a lot of people, they don't think about electronics until.
Well, they had magazines, in the back of the magazines, they had these kits you could order. And at that time, safety was was not a big issue. And I ordered a kit where you could build a transmitter, so I could transmit on an FM radio. With this.
So these would have been magazines laying around.
Yeah, they like
house?
Popular Mechanics or
Like
or
Grandpa
things like
would have
that.
had?
Yeah, in the back. Um, well,
Yeah.
apparently I must have been interested enough. Mom, we had the magazine around, and in
Yeah.
the back of the magazine they had ads for different
Kits. Yeah, I still remember
things
that.
you
Back
could do.
for those of you that were born, after 1990, they have these things
Called
made out
magazines.
of paper. They mail them to your house. It's so inefficient. But in the
Right.
back, they have the classified section, which always had all these interesting
Right.
projects, kits, things you could order. We used to get Popular Science, Popular
Right.
Mechanics growing up. So,
Yeah. And
so you found one of these kits, and that was part of.
yeah, it
developing
had
your
a
interest.
number of different circuits you could build. It had vacuum tubes, which most people, what's a vacuum tube?
Yeah.
But it was something where I had to solder. I had learned how to solder in my dad's garage, and so I knew how to solder things. And I had to solder all the wires up, and it plugged into the wall. It had 110 AC that powered this thing,
Yeah.
and I was, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years old in that area, and I hooked all this stuff up, and of course it had open wires everywhere on it. But it was a tremendous amount of fun, and I as a kid I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
So fast forward a little bit. You're pursuing electronics, doing well. Not a great student in other areas, but in the areas that you had interest and desire,
Yeah.
very good student. But at some point, kind of, bringing in the spiritual. You grew up in a church, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe share a little bit how you had the North Star of like your passion for electronics kind of guiding you, and then how does your spiritual walk kind of blend in there?
Yeah. Well,
as you begin to take that more serious.
as a kid, not that I would recommend this, for everybody, but I kind of decided that I did go to church like 3 times a week. I was at church all the time.
You check the boxes.
And I, heard every Bible story 100 times and so forth. But I had kind of decided that I was just going to be a kid until like I was 20,
Okay.
and 20 or 21, I guess maybe I was.
What did
thinking
just
21.
being a kid mean to you?
Well, it just meant, like there were so many requirements of, to be a good Christian and everything. And it just felt so burdensome.
So intuitively as a child, you're like, this is heavy.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to participate in that.
Well, it wasn't like I was doing bad things.
Right.
I was actually a quite responsible young person, but
the religiosity.
But
of
the reading your Bible every day. I hated to read. I mean, the worst possible. When I left high school, I had read one book cover to cover, other than like Uncle Wiggly or some
Curious
little kid book.
George.
Curious George. And so I hated to read. It was like my worst nightmare to be reading, and so that was part of it, And then when I got married at 20, and part of my vows was to be the spiritual leader of our home. And so, and a weird thing about me is like, if I say I'm going to do something, then I feel compelled to do it,
Mm-hmm.
And so in our early marriage,
So despite the religiosity, throwing that off, Bible says, let your yes be your yes, no be your no.
Yeah.
And by golly, that was something you believed in.
Yeah. And in my first year of marriage, my wife, Kathy, she, your mom, she had a job where she worked in the evening. So like I worked all day, and then I would come home and we'd eat together, and then she'd go to work. and so I had a lot of time on my hands in the evening, and I decided to start reading the Bible.
How'd you decide it? Didn't she call you out?
Well, she did. She kind of said, well, you said you were going to be, our spiritual leader, and I said, oh, okay, I guess I can't argue with that.
So do you remember what precipitated that? Was it just kind of like...
It was just, she just wanted me to be a spiritual man.
Hey, we're all, we're doing this life now together.
Right.
What are you,
right.
What's your plan for
What's
me?
your plan?
Okay, that's as a 20-year-old, that's like
right.
a real question there.
Well, and I wasn't a person who thought about things and strategically. I did just strategically know that I wanted to go study electronics, but it wasn't like I had some big plan for my life or whatever.
Or like a 5-step plan. I was just like, this is all I'm doing.
Just, I love electronics and I love Kathy, and that's what
that's
we're doing.
what I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, I started, and I realized when I started reading the Bible, because yes, I'd heard, many, many stories from the Bible all my life up until that point. And, but reading the Bible, I mean, for a person who hates to read, the Bible is this huge, thick book.
Overwhelming thing.
Overwhelming. And I had read one book cover to cover. And so I knew if I'm going to do this, and I really kind of made an agreement with God, which, it was basically me telling him what I was thinking. But it was like, I'm going to read this through. I'm going to try to believe everything that I've ever been taught, but I'm going to be checking to see if what I've been taught is what the Bible says, And I said, I hate to read, I hate to read. You've got to do something about that. I don't know what, but you've got to do something about that. So I read through the entire Bible in 6 weeks.
6 weeks.